As we've discussed before, many of our local cemeteries have become a tourist attraction all their own. Today we visit probably the biggest tourist attraction when it comes to cemeteries, and that is St. Louis number 1. I do have to start off this video by saying that as of the filming of this episode, which is November of 2021, St. Louis Cemetery number 1 and 2 are still closed. They've been closed since the beginning of COVID, and we don't have a timetable on when they'll be open again to the public. So please take that in mind when you look at different tours and activities. So in normal times, this cemetery can be accessed only with a licensed tour guide or permission from the Archdiocese of New Orleans if you have family here. This rule was put into place in an attempt to control the high amounts of vandalism that had occurred at some of the tombs. I, for one, agree with the effort since the location is on the National Historic Register, and with good reason. St. Louis Cemetery number 1 was established in 1789, and it holds the distinction of being the oldest existing cemetery in the city of New Orleans. In 1788, the city of New Orleans suffered a number of significant setbacks, including the first of 2 great fires, and an epidemic that taxed the already full cemetery located on St. Peter Street. In response to concerns from physicians about the spread of disease, the acting government of the city ordered the earlier cemetery to be closed and a new cemetery to be established further away from the population. The church selected a 300-square-foot parcel bordering marshy swampland outside of the confines of the fortified city, and about 40 yards from the rear garden of where the then located Charity Hospital stood. That was to be the site of the new cemetery. The cemetery was initially constructed as a temporary burial site, but was soon after approved as permanent by Spanish royal decree on August 14, 1789. Following the convention established in the St. Peter Cemetery, in 1803, a city ordinance was issued mandating that all forms of interment occur above ground in an effort to deal with the low-lying landscape of where the cemetery was located and the constant threat of flooding. This was not quite as problematic inside the ramparts of the city. Though the mandate was not strictly followed, it did help advance the style of tombs we're most familiar with today here in New Orleans. Through heavy use throughout its early years, the cemetery expanded from the confines of its original footprint, eventually reaching directly up to the ramparts of the fortified city. Following the Louisiana Purchase in 1803 and the Haitian Revolution of 1791 to 1804, the demographics of New Orleans' population shifted dramatically. Americans came from the northern states, and most of them were Protestant. And thousands of refugees from Haiti arrived with a mixture of Catholic, Caribbean, and West African-based religions. The cemetery was enlarged to accommodate this influx, with an additional parcel of land added to the rear of the original footprint to use as the Protestant burial ground, and adjacent to the space allotted for the burial of African Americans and other people of color. In June 1832, the New Orleans City Council set upon a plan to extend Conti, Treme, and Basin Street in a way to cross the land occupied by the cemetery. The church wardens and city surveyors supervised the work to transfer the burials within the way of the extensions to within the smaller planned footprint of the cemetery. The current main entrance gate dates to this road project. By 1838, the majority of the remains in the Protestant section had been relocated to the Girard Street Cemetery. Look forward to an upcoming episode on that. And in 1840, what was left of the section on the west side of Treme was sold as building lots. Today, only a small strip of the Protestant section remains bordering Treme and Conti Streets and is now under the care of the New Orleans Catholic Cemeteries. In 1975, St. Louis number 1 was listed on the National Register of Historic Places and having a national level of significance in the areas of art and architecture. It was later listed as part of the African American Heritage Trail by the state of Louisiana in 2008, due to the large number of historical and currently significant African Americans that are interred within the cemetery. So who's buried in St. Louis number 1? Well, let's start off with one of my favorite characters. This is going to be Bernard de Marigny. He was born in 1785 into New Orleans' wealthiest family. He was a man both loved and hated, depending on whom you ask on any given day. But Bernard de Marigny proved to be one of the most influential men during the early 19th century. He was solely responsible for maintaining the French language within government and school systems after Louisiana was traded to the Americas in 1803. So, no list of the various famous people buried in St. Louis Cemetery number 1 would be complete without mentioning the notorious actor Nicolas Cage. While he remains alive, that didn't stop Cage from preemptively commissioning a tomb to be constructed in New Orleans' most famous burial site. So as we move down our list, we want to talk about Plessy versus Ferguson. This is the U.S. Supreme Court case generally known throughout the United States. It was referenced in the 1954 U.S. Supreme Court when it passed Brown versus Board of Education. This is all about Homer Plessy. But who was Homer Plessy? A New Orleans native, Plessy was born in 1862 to 2 white parents. His great-grandmother had been brought to Louisiana from Africa, making him 1/8 African. Like many other gens de couleur libres, free people of color, in New Orleans, Homer Plessy's family passed as white, but Homer refused. Plessy, on behalf of the Citizens Committee, purchased a first-class ticket on the East Louisiana Railroad in 1892 and sat down in the whites-only section of the car. Plessy protested the violation of his 13th and 14th Amendment rights and promptly found himself in court against Judge John Howard Ferguson. Plessy was deemed guilty, and the case rose all the way to the U.S. Supreme Court in 1896. Another name that people may know is Paul Morphy. Better known as the unofficial world champion of chess, Paul Morphy literally changed the game of chess during the 19th century, and he did all this before the age of 20. He later suffered a head injury and early death at his home and is interred in the cemetery. Next on our list of who's who is Etienne de Boer. He was treated to the custom of French Creole boys in the French colony and shipped off to France for his education. In fact, his ancestry was so well off that upon completion of schooling, Etienne was named one of the King of France Musketeers. Etienne de Boer, having already been a king's musketeer and captain of the cavalry in France, successfully granulated sugarcane in the year 1795 and changed the production of sugar and plantation life forever. When the Louisiana Purchase was signed in 1803, Etienne was named the first mayor of the city of New Orleans. Of all the people interred within St. Louis Cemetery number 1, the tomb of Marie Laveau is probably the most visited and most talked about. She was born in 1801. Marie Laveau was a free woman of color in New Orleans. Legends and rumors have surrounded Marie for centuries. She was referred to as the Voodoo Queen. By the time of her death and interment in 1881, the city of New Orleans were convinced of her immortality. Well, I hope you enjoyed our look at St. Louis number 1, the oldest cemetery in New Orleans. Stick around with us and watch some of our other videos. We'll make sure we let you know as soon as tours are available here again. Please take a minute to subscribe to the channel and give us a like. And as always, thanks for being part of our Big Easy Life.